Chapter 2, Lesson 7, Divide Fractions. Our learning objective is you will use number lines and the reciprocal and inverse operations to divide fractions. Unlock the problem. Toby and his dad are building a doghouse. They need to cut a board that is 2/3 yard long into 1/6 yard pieces. How many 1/6 yard pieces can they cut? So one way that we can do this is to divide 2/3 by 1/6 by using a number line. So we need to think, I'm going to divide a whole into thirds. So they've already divided those into thirds. And then, so Toby and his dad have 2/3 yard, so shade in 2/3 of the yard. So divide it into thirds. This is the 2/3 that we are talking about. Then step 2 is to show fraction parts that represent the piece of the board. So if each of these is going to be 1/6, we need to look and see how many 1/6 pieces there are in the yard. And there are 4 1/6 pieces in the yard, because you can see out of these 2/3, when we break it into 6, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 groups of 1/6. So it's just like the model, but instead we're putting it on a number line instead of modeling with boxes. Another way that we could do that is to divide 2/3 by 1/6 by using common denominator. So step 1 is to write the equivalent fractions using a common denominator. So we are going to think 6 is a multiple of both 3 and 6, so 6 is a common denominator. So I can turn 2/3 into something with a 6 as a denominator. So to do that, I need to take the 2 times 2 and the 3 times 2 so that I get this to equal 6. And then divided by 1/6. So then when I take 2 times 2, that ends up being 4. 4/6 divided by 1/6. Step 2 is to divide. Think that there are 4 groups of 1/6 and 4/6. Because 1/6 plus 1/6 plus 1/6 plus 1/6 equals the 4/6, which is what we're trying to find. So 4/6 divided by 1/6 equals 4. So 2/3 divided by 1/6 equals 4. So Toby and his dad can cut 4 1/6 yard pieces. Okay, another thing that we were going to talk about is that you can use reciprocals and inverse operations to divide fractions. Two numbers whose product is 1 are reciprocals or multiplicative inverses. So, for example, 2/3 times 3/2. 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 2 is 6. They equal 1. So 2/3 and 3/2 are reciprocals. So same thing goes for 1/4 and 4/1, or 7/8 and 8/7. Those are all reciprocals if these are flip-flopped in the opposite order. So our activity here is going to be to find a pattern. So complete the table by finding the products. How are each pair of division and multiplication problems the same, and how are they different? Okay, so if we have 4/7 divided by 2/7, and then we look over here at 4/7 times 7/2, they both equal 2. 5/6 divided by 4/6 equals 5/4. If we have 5/6 multiplied by 6/4, we're also going to get, 30 over 24, which equals 5/4. If we take 1/3 divided by 5/9, we get 3/5, or 1/3 times 9/3. If we just simplify, we get 3/5. So how are each pair of division and multiplication problems the same, and how are they different? The first fractions and the answers in each pairs are the same. So the answers are the same. The second fraction in each pair are reciprocals of each other. So So for example, when we look at 2/7, 7/2 is the reciprocal, or 4/6 and 6/4, 5/9 and 9/5. So that second fraction has the reciprocal in the multiplication problem. So how could you use the pattern in the table to rewrite a division problem involving fractions as a multiplication problem? So we can write the division as multiplication. By using the reciprocal of the divisor. That's why it's super important that you know what is being divided by what, because you have to use the reciprocal of the divisor. You can't use the reciprocal of just whichever one. For example, Winnie needs pieces of string for a craft project. How many 1/12 yard pieces of string can she cut from a piece that is 3/4 yard long? So here we're taking 3/4 divided into 1/12 pieces. So if we're going to estimate that, if we take 3/4, we can think that's pretty close to 1. If we divide it into 1/12 pieces, we're going to have 12 pieces. So our estimate is 12. We're going to use the reciprocal of the divisor to rewrite a multiplication problem. So we're going to take 3/4 divided by 1/12 and turn it into 3/4 times 12 over 1. When we simplify the factors, we're going to take 12 divided by 4, which is 3, and 4 divided by 4, which is not 4, which is 1. And that equals, if we take 3 times 3, which is 9, over 1, which is just going to be 9. Now we're going to check our answers. 1/12 times 9 equals 9/12, which equals 3/4, so that must be correct. Since the estimate is 12, the answer is reasonable, so Winnie cut 9 1/12 pieces of string. If you have any questions, please ask your teacher. And remember that our objective was you will use number lines and the reciprocal and inverse operations to divide fractions.